Hello, explorers, and welcome to Reach the World's Explorer program. For more than 25 years, Reach the World has sparked student curiosity, bringing real-world adventure, fresh perspectives, and career pathways into K-12 classrooms, all through virtual exchange. My name is Tim, and today we're off on the next chapter of Reach the World's virtual exchange program titled Deep Sea Detectives, the Search for MH370. Today's speaker is a familiar face to many of us here at Reach the World. Ocean Infinity's Chad Bonin is going to join us today. Chad, as you may already know, is a marine robotics expert with years of experience working offshore on all kinds of projects all around the world. And he's agreed to talk to us today about the human element of deep sea detective work. We've talked a lot about how exciting marine robotics are, how open the ocean floor is to discovery. But today we're going to hear from Chad. How does finding missing things on the ocean floor bring closure to grieving families, especially when something that's being searched for on the ocean floor involved a loss of life along the way? It's a heavy but important topic, and we'll get to ask Chad all about it in just a minute. Before we bring him on camera, though, I have just two quick classroom shout outs. We've got some newcomers joining us from Miss Wu's class at Old Turnpike Middle School in New Jersey. Welcome. And of course, welcome back to Miss Palmer students in Maine joining us today. Very, very excited to include some student questions in our conversation today because it's an important one. And as always, remember, we have amazing articles already published on the Journey homepage for this program, including one from Chad on the very topic we're discussing today. As he's talking, I'll drop that in the chat today so that you have that link handy. Should you want to return to that article after our conversation. I'll also add the link to the Journey homepage generally, where there's a lot of amazing articles from our Ocean Infinity guests over the last few weeks. And I think that's about it for housekeeping today. Let's give a warm welcome to Mr. Chad Bonin. Hey, Chad.
Hey, everybody. How's it going, Tim?
Welcome.
Long time no see, buddy.
Before we dive into our topic, what can you tell us about where you are today? Because there's always an interesting answer to that when I ask you.
Yeah. So right now I'm still sitting. I'm on the one of the Ocean Infinity Armada vessels, 8605. We're in port right now in Pago Pago, the American Samoa Islands. We have a project about 24 hours transit from this location. And we're just in for a crew change and refueling and provisions resupply.
Amazing. Way out in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. It feels like you're right next door to us today, and on a ship to boot. I mean, you had me fooled when we joined that you're on a ship, maybe except for those amazing monitors behind you today.
That's one of the AUV workstations right there.
Very, very cool. We've learned a lot over the last couple of weeks from your colleagues about the amazing things Ocean Infinity is doing to search for things on the ocean floor, generally defined all over the world, and the amazing technology that you all use to do that. Can you talk a little bit about your career path to present day? How did you get into this field of being, the AUV, the marine robotics expert that you are, and living and working on ships all over the world?
Yeah, so, well, my career actually started very young. I was an airboat operator and on a seismic job. And then from there, I ended up hauling the surveyors around on my airboat and then learning their system. And then eventually just went from airboats to offshore survey. And then from there, the progression of offshore survey and technology changes went from towed geophysical equipment to now the AUVs have all the same style of equipment, but all mounted onto the hull of the AUV. So it was just a steady progression of offshore survey. As technology got better, so did projects, so did jobs and everything else.
So you've sort of come up through this industry in a very, very exciting time when the technology is booming, changing by the minute in some cases. Yes. How do you keep up with all of that? It seems like there's some new, fun, amazing, powerful tool every day.
Definitely. Yeah, I can remember when I first started offshore, we used to hand carry the computers where it was still the big monitors and everything was just huge. And now, say 28 years later, technology smaller and smaller. So it's a constant learning experience, because technology changes, especially nowadays. Technology changes quite often. So you're always seeing new equipment, um, learning new software that you have to work with that equipment. It's ever changing.
I mean, in a nutshell, you're a very curious person, not strange curious, but curious about the world.
That's
You
right.
always, it struck me as someone who wants to know what's coming up and what's cool about and what it can do that the last stuff couldn't do. And I think that's a great lesson for kids, being
Yeah,
curious about the world around you. You have
definitely.
you've been involved in so many projects. We could talk for hours and hours and hours about all the interesting things you've investigated or been part of investigating in your career at Oceanfinity and elsewhere. But today we want to talk about a search that you were a part of for a missing submarine. It happens, submarines all over the world, all over our world's oceans,
Hmm.
go missing from time to time. And it often involves a loss of life, a lot of tragedy sort of wrapped up in these stories. Can you sort of walk us through the story of the ARA San Juan and your involvement in the project and what that experience was like for you?
Yeah, so the ARA San Juan was definitely one that I remember. This was back in we were on the project in 2018, but it's one that I'll remember forever. We were with Ocean Infinity. We were called upon to go search for the missing submarine, the Argentinian submarine, which was at that time missing for maybe 10 or 11 months, actually. And we came in on the last part of that to search. I think we had like a 45 or 60-day search, and it had been missing for quite a while. Basically, we came in and we did the long search with. We had, I believe it was 4 or 5 that we put in the water to search for this one, and it got to the point where we were at the end of our contract and we hadn't found the submarine. Um, so then we actually were finishing up, wrapping everything up, had all the AVs on board, and we were told about another possible acoustic anomaly further north from where we were searching at. And we went over to just do one little dive to see if we can find it wherever this acoustic ping was at. Did not find it there. And again, it was the end of the project. All the AUVs were done. We were heading out to the next one, and then we were rerouted back to the search site for a target that we had found, but it was not classified as something to go back for further investigation. And then from that point, when we went back, we launched one of the AUVs. It was just basically the decision was go back, test just, do one dive on this one location. And sure enough, that was it. So we actually found it 1 year and 1 day from the time it went missing.
You wrote in your Reach the World article, I thought a fabulous article about having members of the Argentine Navy on your ship as you were searching for that submarine, and I think in also having members of sort of families of crew members who had died in that tragic accident. Can you talk a little bit about? I mean, you described beautifully the ups and downs of finding, not finding something, the mystery. Are you going to find it? Should we go investigate this? But what about you as a person? Like, what does that feel like? You've been involved in many projects where you're just recovering something from the ocean bottom and there's not maybe a ton of emotion involved, but this feels like a very emotional environment.
Yeah, most definitely. So we had, yeah, as you said, we had the representatives of the Argentinian Navy on board, and then we also had representatives of the family members that were on board the submarine. So it was 3 representatives for the family members, and then it was interesting because there's that whole, you have those family members there. You know, the Argentinian Navy representatives are there to look after and identify their submarine. But with the family members there, it changed the whole way we went about, you know, doing our search, and just the whole element of compassion with the family members being there. Because like you said, an AUV survey is an AUV survey. We find ships, we find artifacts on the seabed, and usually it's just artifacts. We report it and we go back and check on it later on or whatever. But this time for the San Juan, the like I said, the element of compassion for the family members that were on board, it was very interesting. Like I said, we went north after we finished the contract, went north to go look for that acoustic anomaly, and that was actually being pushed by one of the family members. It was one of the representatives on board, because they kept saying, you know, they kept mentioning that we were in the wrong spot. You know, they kept, you know, mentioning that, okay, we got this acoustic anomaly over here. So being that it was a very, I guess, emotional search, we went ahead and went and searched over there. Did not find it. And then Andy Sherrill, who was overseeing the project and looking at all the target reports, sent us back to this one target. And like I said, we ended up finding it right there. But the really interesting part was, the protocol originally was going to be that if we found it, we would launch an ROV and do an initial sweep, and the Argentinian Navy would be in there watching the video monitors. Once it's identified and we did the initial sweep, then the family members would be able to come in and view everything. That didn't work out like that. So it was, everybody was in the ROV shack watching the monitors. So it when I say I'll remember this till forever, it was like the old saying, you can hear a pin drop, you know, because it was so quiet. We were flying the ROV, and then first you'd see a little bit of debris here, a little bit of debris here, there. And then when they panned up one time, and you can start seeing the submarine. There was probably about 20 or 30 people in the room, extremely quiet. You know, thinking back on it now, I'm getting a little emotional about it now too, because it was, you know, having those family members in there, you know, we were just really worried about what they would see as the ROVs flying in. That was the main thing we were worried about. So all was well, which was great. But the Navy did identify the submarine, and we did the sweep, you know, of all around and everything else. But it was, once it was confirmed and once we did the sweep, you can just see the emotion from everyone, from us, from the Navy, from the family members. It was just a flood of emotions in that room. It was finally found. That it was a mystery at first, you know, because they no one could find it. They didn't know where it was at. They had a few pings from when it was on surface last go around, and then before it went down. But the flood of emotions in that room, I will remember that for the rest of my life. You know.
Can you sort of compare the feeling of, you know, you've done both surveys. You and I have been involved in a project where, you know, there was nothing but pure elation when we found what we were looking for. After months and lots of effort spent, finding what you were looking for was just a pure joy, right? This feels like a different sort of scenario. You're happy. Of course, everybody's happy that you found what you were looking for. Yeah. But you've identified the final resting place of these loved ones.
Yeah. So it was the true saying of tears of joy for everyone. You know, the flood of emotions, you know, it was tears from everybody, but turned into tears of joy, because now they can move on to the next step of, okay, they found the family members, they found the submarine. what's next. And I don't remember what the final step was on that, but at least we accomplished what we did, and we gave closure to all the family members who were worried and wondering what's happened to their family members on that submarine.
Yeah. Well, I think it's a really important story to talk about and reflect on. And it's really great to have your sort of having been in the room experience with that. Because generally speaking, when we talk about looking for things on the seabed,
Yeah.
Everybody pictures a pirate ship, an old pirate ship full of gold. And,
Right.
It's a different kind of thing. But when we talk about deep sea detectives and the work that Oceanfinity does all over the world, it is often about solving an unknown question, right? Bringing
Right.
an answer that doesn't, make anybody rich or make anybody sort of like over the top happy, but it's a different sort of emotional payoff.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, this one was definitely different compared to every other search I've done with Oceanfinity. It was just that element of compassion that we had to have with all the family members and Argentinian Navy representatives on board. So that just changed the dynamic of what we were used to with all our normal searches.
Sure. And can you talk a little bit about sort of, you've discovered this submarine, you've brought closure to these families. Do you then just sort of go away and that's the result of the survey? Everything is sort of left where it is, and you have your answer to your question and you move on?
Yeah, I mean it's some way. I mean, we do try to keep up with it, but after some time, it's like everything else. You're waiting to hear what's going to happen to the submarine. But yeah, I mean, initially you keep up with it, because again, it was quite the impact on every person that was on board, and just over time, you hear about it in news, and then just it kind of fades out. So I actually haven't checked in on it in quite some time now.
Yeah. Well, you did your detective work, and
Yeah.
the case proceeds, so to speak.
Yeah.
We have all gotten together for this virtual exchange sort of under the context of the renewed search for the missing Malaysian airliner 370 in the Southern Indian Ocean. And that search is ongoing, of course. There's a lot of parallels between the story you just told and what may or may not be happening in the South Indian Ocean, because it was a tragic accident, a tragic loss of life. And there are a lot of people wondering, like, what happened? What happened here? There's more questions than answers about that. How do you feel about being in the position where you can find answers? You have the skill set, you have the tools. You're the person who, if we're talking about police cases, you are the detective.
Yeah.
Who's finding answers to these things?
Well, we're doing our best, Kim. We have the technology on board. We're actually working on a project right now. We are in roughly 55 to 5,600 meters of water depth. So quite deep. So we have the technology to be able to try to find it. It's such a big area, vast area that we're searching that it's like trying to find a needle in a haystack. Mm-hmm. So we have to, keep going back. And we've done a couple of campaigns. They just finished one. I'm on the vessel now, 8605, that just finished the MH370 campaign here recently, the beginning of this year. So, it's keep trying. Hopefully we'll find that needle in the haystack and be able to give some answers to what happened,
Yeah, I think for all of our students who are following at home and certainly, read the news, it's very interesting to know that before this becomes, here's what happened in the newspapers, there are people like you who are out in the world using this powerful marine technology to get the answers so that we can tell a more complete story about what has happened. What's next for you? What do you prefer? I mean, let me state that a little bit differently. These searches where you're really doing something that is so obviously good and finding answers for these folks who have lost loved ones, and then other projects that are maybe a little less emotional. Do you, which one, if you had to choose only one? I imagine there's plus and minuses of both.
There is. You know, on the side of, like, if we have to do search and it's involving personnel, then, you know, that like you said, there's positive and negatives to both. It's being able to give closure to the families in searches in that aspect, and then other times, depending on what we're looking for, and it's just more of a search and locate for whatever artifact. It's the excitement of finding it, right? On that aspect.
Mm-hmm. There's still a little bit of sort of underlying curiosity. I've seen your face light up when somebody's told you, like, this is going to be impossible to find.
Yeah,
some people think of that as
we'll give it a shot.
As a, you know, like, oh, well, why should I try? But I've never seen you react to anything other than
challenge accepted.
We'll find it. You know, this is something that's is hard and is worth doing. Let's do it. We have some students who are joining us from Maine today, Ms. Palmer's class. They are in the background, ready, I hope, to ask some questions. And I want to welcome them to the stage and invite any students who have heard the story of the Area 71 to step up and ask questions that they might have for you.
Hey, everybody.
Aiden, you ready?
Sure. When you found the submarine, were most of the family members sad or were they happy?
So at first, you know, there was that, it was a roller coaster of emotions going on. At first they were sad, and as you know, as expected, you know, because they're seeing basically the last resting place of their loved ones. But because it's found and they have more answers to what actually happened to the submarine, it was, you know, after that initial flood of emotion, they were happy. And it, you know, everybody was, the word excited is not correct, but I mean, happy and able to talk more about it, because it was very quiet. The emotions had everybody very quiet with everything that was going on.
Yeah, wonderful.
My colleague Ben in the background, coming off the deck of the boat, working.
Hey, Ben. Great question. Do we have another question?
Have you found any other stuff that has gone missing while you're looking for the MH370?
Well, after MH370, my friend Tim here and myself were on a project that we actually found a boat that went missing in 1914 under the ice in Antarctica.
Wow.
That's a whole other story, isn't it, Chad?
Yeah, definitely.
Yes. I would say, though, generally, like, with that great question, is it fairly common for you to find things you're not looking for as you're searching for something specific?
Yes, actually. So we were actually searching for one vessel in a certain area, and ended up finding two. We actually didn't find the one we were looking for, but we found two other vessels within the survey area.
Amazing. There's so much to find on the seabed.
It is.
Great question.
It's just such a vast area, and you know, back then ships, they didn't have, you know, some of the ones that we're looking for. It was all done by handheld navigation. You know, there was no GPS back then, so.
370.
Okay. Are you guys gonna look for the 370 plane again?
I believe so. There has been emails back and forth about that. We don't have a certain date yet, but it won't be this year. I think it's gonna be at some time next year. But they're still in the contract negotiations and talks and everything else. So I believe we are going back.
Yeah, this search has been going on for years at this point, and there's very good reason, as we've covered on previous live stream, of why it's so hard to find this missing aircraft. It's a really sort of interesting point about how each thing that you go looking for, Chad, is got a very different set of challenges. That the ocean bottom is not perfectly flat.
Oh man, yes.
Or uniformly shallow or deep. It is its own challenge. So, and yeah, I believe the results of the first search by Ocean Infinity recently for MH370 have not been announced. And you know, that search will keep going as it keeps going, I think, until we've got questions answered in the way Chad just talked about.
A prime example of what you were saying about the terrain. I mean, on the project we're on now, it's fairly flat, general slope, you know, this and that. But MH370, oh, the terrain is gnarly. I mean, we were in a lot of cliffs, crevices. You'd be surprised at how big some of these areas are. You know, the terrain change. We've had so many different angles to search in that area, and we still have a lot of shadow zones that we didn't cover, because it's so deep of a crevice that the AUV can't scan down that deep.
Yeah. All right, Ms. Palmer student, go ahead.
How do you think currents may have affected where like the plane is like now, right, or like where it is right now, like how currents in the Indian Ocean?
Great question. Yeah, great question. So you have surface currents, mid-water currents, and then sometimes you're dealing with bottom currents. So depending on what happened to the plane on impact, the debris would definitely be scattered, and especially in the depth of water that it had time from surface to seabed, quite deep. So the debris had time to drift with the surface current and the mid-water currents. So that's a very good question, and that's why it's quite the challenge to find, because it's not like it just went straight down from where it hit the water. You know,
Yeah.
If that was the case, then we would know exactly where it's at.
Mm-hmm. Anybody else have a question? Anybody else? Do you want to ask? Be brave, Elena.
Come on, Elena, you can do it.
Do you think you're ever gonna find the plane?
If we keep trying, I think so. We just have to stay at it, keep going, and the more we search, the more details we have for different areas, and we can, as we search, we eliminate different areas that were possibilities. So it's basically narrowing it down to certain areas.
Mm-hmm.
Another
Excellent question.
Kata?
How confident are you that you're going to find it, considering it's one of the biggest mysteries in history for planes?
Good one. Well, confidence. You know, I'm optimistic. Confidence is a strong word there, but the thing is, you got to consider it went down. It was 2014. You have tidal changes. You have the sand, silt, sediment, depending on what's on bottom, that's moving throughout all those, 12 years now. So
Wow.
I'm optimistic, but the confidence level is, you know, we're still up there, but you know, the more we search, like I said, we'll process the illumination throughout the whole search area. Hopefully we can find it.
Okay, anybody else have a question?
No. Candy.
I was just wondering what happened to the sub that you did find. Do you know what happened to it?
So there was a battery fire in the battery compartment when they were doing some maneuvers. If I remember correctly, there was a battery fire, and so when they went to dive, it lost all comms and then went down and then imploded at a certain depth, and then went all the way. It landed on seabed after that.
Hmm.
So initially, it was the battery fire that started everything.
Hmm.
All right, Aiden has another question.
Did you guys do anything with the Titan submarine? The one that
We did
imploded?
not. No, that wasn't part of us.
Yeah, that's a good question and good connection to other areas of
Yep.
deep sea exploration. The same sort of factors that would have been considered for that submersible and the what happens at the Titanic and exploring the Titanic are things that Chad considers every single day when he's thinking about his marine robotics. What kind of pressure they can hold up to, what they're trying to achieve with their mission. But Chad, I think, and you can talk a little bit more about this, the equipment you work with is not human. There are not humans inside of the equipment you work with. You are strictly robotics, correct?
That's correct. Yeah, everything that we work with on here is all unmanned. It's an autonomous underwater vehicle, AUV for short. So it's not a sub like what the Titan was. So we can send these down. These are rated to 6,000 meters, which is almost 19,700 feet. We're actually working close to our limits right now on this project, but these are definitely unmanned. You don't want to send personnel down that deep on that one.
Ms. Palmer's class knows more than your average class about ROVs and marine robotics. And I want you all to just be thinking about what challenges you'd have to face if you were designing an ROV that needed to go under 3 miles or more of water. The pressure that is on
Exactly.
equipment is intense. And it creates all sorts of other challenges when you're designing and maintaining ROVs. So Ms. Palmer, class, thank you so much for your great question. Are there any others before we move you backstage?
Do we have time for one more?
Absolutely.
Okay, last one.
How fast do the ROVs go? How fast do they go?
So we're surveying at a speed of 3.6 knots on this project. The most we want to do is 3.8, but we can go as slow as 2.8 knots, and it all depends on the terrain, the project, and the detail of the sonar scans that we were looking for.
What are some things you think about, Chad, when you decide like how fast the ROV or AUV is going? Is it the quality of the images you're getting back? Like what are the things going on in your mind when you decide a speed?
Yeah, and that's the main thing is the quality of the data. And we have a camera system on board as well. So we have it going at a certain speed that's all been calculated, and they decided that that's the speed we're going to set it to, but it is quality of data. That's the final product.
All right. Well, Ms. Palmer's class, thank you so much for those great questions. Can we give a big waving goodbye and thanks to Chad for joining us today?
Nice to meet you.
Great to have you on today. Chad, that was phenomenal. You are obviously like an expert in marine robotics, but it's very, I think a lot of us have a very visceral reaction when we read about an awful tragedy that's happened that has sort of been, masked by the mystery of the ocean because the evidence or what the answers are at the bottom of the ocean. Very much so in the case of Malaysian Airlines Flight 370. The examples of the San Juan are, a good analogy, and your first-person perspectives on the emotional reaction that, what we're feeling is also probably what you're feeling, as you're discovering and finding answers. It's a mixed emotion of joy at having answers, but bittersweet because, it makes very real something you knew to be true, but was sort of clouded in mystery.
Definitely, but yeah.
What else you have going on? Anything you want to close with? Any projects you're excited about? Things that you predict being the next big thing in the world of ROVs and AUVs? What's next for ocean exploration and deep sea detective work with marine robotics?
So I have one of our colleagues, Jim, at Deep Ocean Search is doing a lot of manned submarine deep water dives. So that's always an interest of mine.
Mm-hmm.
And
So
that's actually becoming, it's the like I said, the technology, and the more that they can pressure test these subs for actual manned and marine biology. That's a lot of what they're doing, is they're going down deep enough to actually take samples. I think Jim's deepest dive was, last I heard, was 12,000. So quite deep for a manned sub.
Yeah.
But that's very unique right now.
That is amazing. And it's a great reminder that the mysteries of the ocean are not limited to human tragedies. There are there are whole places of the ocean where scientists are still finding new species. How exciting is that in 2026?
Yeah, definitely.
New species being discovered in our oceans. We know, in total, very little about what's happening in the deep oceans, and all of this work that's going to solve human questions and give us answers to human tragedies is also making possible new discoveries and new understanding about the ocean. So, on behalf of Reach the World students, thank you so much for all of the work that you're doing to demystify this amazing underwater place. We are just about at the end of our time for today. The topics of discussion today, especially about loss of life and as it relates to the search for the Malaysian Airlines Flight 370, are really difficult and very real. And it's important that we talk about the emotional impact of deep sea detective work. And Chad, as always, you do a great job of doing that with great empathy. So thank you. For our educators and students, keep an eye on our Deep Sea Detectives Journey homepage. You had great questions today. Thank you so much. We have one more live stream to go in this program. We're going to come back to Karsten, who we met at the beginning of our journey, and we're going to bring together all the topics that we've talked about over the last few weeks. So make sure and check out new articles and join us again next week for our final live stream of this virtual exchange program. And of course, stay tuned for the results of the search for Malaysian Airlines Flight 370. It gives me great comfort to know we've got very, very skilled, talented, compassionate, wonderful people like you, Chad, who are continuing that search. And hopefully we'll find some answers in the future for those families that were affected, and all of us who are bothered by that tragedy. So, Chad, thanks a lot. Until next time, students.
You're welcome, buddy.
Great to see you. Take care. And that's it for now. Keep exploring. Bye-bye.